band I'm referring to in the title of this video is a Welsh act with the somewhat ungainly name Gorky's Zygotic Mynci, who played a fusion of psychedelic rock, prog, pop, and folk music, with some fluctuation about which of those elements was most dominant in their sound at a given time. Now, I've been a fan of theirs since I was a teenager, but, as my level of musical knowledge and experience has accrued over the years, I've been just repeatedly struck whenever I come back to their work by, on the one hand, the stream of consciousness quality of pure imagination, right? And a total open-mindedness and experimental freedom, with, on the other hand, such a level of melodic craft and emotional commitment that whatever they do is really consistently listenable and accessible. And that balance, the way that they balance the more experimental and surreal aspect of what they do with listenability and melody, the strength of that balance, I think, is the equal of any of the other kinds of bands I've talked about on this channel. As for the underrated part, their Wikipedia page mentions that they had 8 singles in the UK top 75 without ever getting one into the top 40, and in the United States they really never had any kind of commercial traction at all. And I really don't hear them referred to very often, even among fans of experimental and progressive music. I really never hear them referred to much, if at all, by fans of experimental or progressive music. And, if they're not forgotten precisely, then it seems like they're mostly remembered by the small number of people who were passionate about them while they were active. I would imagine that some of that present underratedness, some of that lack of retrospective attention might be connected to their absence from streaming. As of the recording of this video, only one of their albums and the associated singles and B-sides can be found on streaming. And all of their albums are out of print on physical media, relatively easy to find affordably on CD, very difficult to find affordably on vinyl. And while their main singer and songwriter, Euros Childs, does have a pretty extensive solo career, he has really done that pretty much entirely outside of the context of the conventional music industry. So, nothing that he does is really bringing any attention to them beyond what they would have had at the time they broke up. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about the arc of their history, maybe just a smidge about my own relationship to them, and really try to pin down and define as much as I can what made them special. I'm also going to try to include some clips from their songs, just for viewers who aren't familiar, to help give examples of the kinds of things that I'm talking about. Hopefully those don't get nailed by copyright. As always, I'm Hans from Electric Brain, Electric Shadow. We are a contemporary art rock project that, not unlike Gorky's, strives for a mix of emotional depth and sonic experimentation and musical eclecticism. Check us out on Bandcamp or your favorite streaming service. So Gorky's Zygotic Mynci was formed in 1991 while the members were still in school, and their earliest era is chronicled in a compilation called Patio, which is interesting because you can literally hear Euros's voice changing over the course of the album. I don't own a vinyl copy, but supposedly it has pre-balls dropping etched on one side, balls dropped etched on the other. I'm not really going to talk about that release in detail because it's kind of a peripheral part of their overall catalog, but it is a very interesting piece of their legend. Where I want to start, actually, is with the compilation Introducing, which was the first thing that any kind of American audience has really heard of them, myself included. Now, they had been signed to the independent label Onx to release 2 albums and a few singles and EPs, and in 1996, they signed to the major label Mercury, who pulled some of those tracks together for a compilation for American release. Now, I don't know what promotional strategy the label had in mind when they released that compilation, but, whatever it was, they really never found an effective way to get them in front of an American audience. Introducing did get some good reviews. It got a little bit of word of mouth among music obsessives, but it didn't really get on the American album charts. None of the songs from it got on American radio in any kind of widespread way, at least. And as a 14-year-old, the way that I actually found out about the band was through catalogs for the Columbia House Record Club. Columbia House, of course, are famous for being the business that you could repeatedly defraud to get a bunch of free CDs or tapes by joining under a fake name. And I did that a few times, of course, while I was growing up. It's become kind of a favorite 90s memory, I think. But, you know, Columbia House would also publish basically clearance bin catalogs, things you could buy for $1.99 that it seemed like they were just trying to get out of the warehouse. And I saw Introducing in one of those catalogs, you know, and I saw the name of the band. I saw that cover art of a cartoon moon playing a xylophone. And I just thought, what the hell is this, right? It seemed weird and silly and more like something you would buy just to laugh at. But it piqued my curiosity, and $1.99 is basically free, even for an unemployed 14-year-old in the 90s, so I went ahead and bought it. Now, at that age, I already had a pretty good grounding in at least the basics of art rock, right? I knew the whole Genesis catalog pretty well. I knew Yes and King Crimson reasonably well. I had a bunch of Moody Blues albums. So, you know, I was probably more inclined than a lot of people my age in that time would have been toward that kind of music. And as soon as I heard the second track, If Fingers Were Xylophones, you know, I understood immediately that while this was a group that used humor and absurdity, they were harnessing those qualities to serve really a remarkable vision and compositional talent. Now, I didn't have the experience or the knowledge to recognize it at the time, but, you know, this is a symphonic pop song in the mode of something like classic Beach Boys, right? With an arrangement that is maximally crammed full of wonderful organic sounds, right? There's horns and violin and flutes, all adding secondary melodies. There's multiple layers of synthesizers, there are deep harmonies, there are dueling slide guitar lines. And it doesn't quite have an obvious verse-chorus construction, right? It feels more like two perfect choruses welded together by this bridge of thick, distorted guitar. Now, the first three songs on this compilation aren't quite as weird as you might expect from the band name and the cover art. You know, it was unusual at this time to hear songs which pack so many ideas into such a small space, and about half the songs on the compilation are in Welsh. But a lot of the time it doesn't feel like they're trying to be weird. It feels like they are putting total commitment and energy into making the best music that they can, and because of their tastes and personalities, it happens to come out weird. But the fourth song, The Game of Eyes, feels weird in a more conventional sense. Let me play you a clip. That big booming announcer voice and the narration in particular are kind of silly in a way that the songs on this compilation, when I was listening to it, hadn't been so far. But that weirdness actually becomes exciting because they're smart enough to pull it off. The verse melody is wonderful. The arrangement, once again, is packed with all kinds of great organic sounds. The verse melody is wonderful. The arrangement, once again, is packed with all kinds of great organic sounds. The lyric is, you know, it's inscrutable, but it's joyfully inscrutable, and it feels imagistic and cinematic. And it really illustrates what made Gorky's wonderful during this period, which is They had these incredibly left-field lyrical and sonic ideas, but they always had the melodic intelligence and the compositional sophistication to make them listenable and appealing. Now, a clip from the 9th track on Introducing, Methu Aros Tan Haf, illustrates a couple more significant things about the band. First, of course, this is in Welsh, as is maybe a quarter, give or take, of their whole catalog. And as a teenager, that use of the Welsh language actually didn't put me off as much as you might think. In general, I think music in foreign languages actually tends to be more marketable than maybe it gets credit for, because there are so many different ways for songs to carry ideas and emotion beyond just words. And in my video on Why I Love Prague, I talked about how important it is for me that music contain imaginative space, right? That it feel like a world you can kind of roam around in, an alternate reality. And Gorky's, of course, did that as well as anybody. Their songs in this period often feel like beautiful, surreal, miniature films that kind of unfold in the space of 2 or 3 minutes. And the use of Welsh, I think, actually enhances that sense of mystery and otherworldness, right? It gives it a beguiling effect that makes you want to listen a bit more closely. This clip also highlights the violin playing from Euros' sister Megan, who was a key member of the group. Her violin feels almost like it's duetting with the lead vocal. It bolsters the song with additional melodies, which add color and mood and emotional depth. And as they moved forward, her work would be something which could keep even one of their more simple, straightforward songs from ever feeling too plain or understated. So most of the songs on Introducing were singles or EPs which were recorded and released between June 94 and June 96. And just prior to that, in March 1994, they had released their first full-length album called Tatay. Now, this album doesn't necessarily have the lushness and sonic density of the singles. The violin only appears sporadically, and it does feel kind of stripped down and stark by comparison. But hearing them in the context of simpler arrangements really emphasizes the quality of the underlying writing. The melodies and vocal performances, combined with the Welsh lyrics, give this album a very strong mood of longing for something which can't quite be described or defined, as in the song "O Caroline" 2. Oh, Caroline, Many of the people watching this video might be familiar with the term saudade, which, as I understand it, is a Portuguese word for a kind of quasi-nostalgic longing or melancholy. And there's a Welsh word, hiraeth, which is roughly equivalent, and that feeling is very strongly felt throughout their music, and particularly in this album. Tatay also shows a remarkable drive toward experimentation, despite relative starkness and what sounds like a somewhat low budget. For instance, there's one track which contains 2 songs, one in the left channel, one in the right channel, or there's the track Gwish Pernham, which uses found object percussion. Today is also a good time to talk about something which might be of interest to a lot of the people that watch my channel, which is the influence that Gorky's took from the Canterbury school of progressive rock bands. There's a song here called Kevin Ayers, which samples the ambient student noise from Ayers' release Joy of a Toy, and borrows its lyrics from Ayers' Shouting in a Bucket Blues. And the liner notes refer to his album Shooting at the Moon as their favorite ever. It also has a cover of the matching Mole song Oh Caroline, though in this case translated into Welsh. Now, Gorky's didn't have the instrumental chops or the complexity of the Canterbury bands, which is fine because almost nobody does, right? But they did share the surrealistic imagination of the Canterbury bands and a particular emotional tone where you have a surface-level mood of whimsy and surrealism that lightly covers a deeper foundation of melancholy and self-deprecation. And the other thing that they shared with the Canterbury bands was ambition without pretension, right? A way of making music which is naturally, unself-consciously smart enough to allow itself to occasionally be dumb. In July 1995, they released their second album, Bwyd Time. The first side of Bwyd Time is a really classic example of their kaleidoscopic psychedelic pop sound. And in fact, many of the songs from the first half of this album were released as singles, such as Gyuni Gorfin, which is another song that really captures the sense of sadness and longing that I've been talking about. But the second side of Bwyd Time is the maddest thing that they ever did in a career with a lot of mad things, right? It's a loosely connected suite of songs which throws in every kind of psychedelic trick you can imagine. Surreal spoken word narratives, sound effects, sitar, drones, chanting. The centerpiece of side 2 is a suite built around repeated themes and lyrical ideas from the song The Man with Salt Hair, which flips back and forth between kind of majestic and childlike moods. And the closing track, Farm Whir, alternates passages of feedback and synthesizer drone with something a bit like a skewed version of folk music. And it builds to a crescendo that's based on this winding chromatic riff that, if you arranged it a bit more intricately, could almost be Van der Graaf Generator. As always, though, the strangeness and darkness of the Bwyd Time suite are balanced by an instinct for hummable melody and a habit of concision. This is the most self-indulgent they ever got, but it still never feels unfocused. It still never feels like it wastes time. It never feels like anything lingers longer than it has to for the idea to come across. So this has been the first part of my series on Gorky's Zygotic Mynci. I'd been planning to make this a 2-part video, but just looking at how things are shaking out in editing, it'll probably be more like a 3-part video. The section that I've covered today is their Angst Records period, which was really the time when they had the loudest, most overtly strange music, the most packed with ideas. I've talked especially about the compilation Introducing, which is a really excellent introduction to their work that certainly not comprehensive, but it can be found through Amazon or Discogs for maybe $5-6 probably. So a very affordable way to get a good cross-section of their best work, if what I've talked about here seems interesting to you. Next time I'll be talking about the transitional period in the middle of their career when their sound and themes began to mellow out a little bit, though they still created some really fantastic music during this time. Thanks much for your time and attention, and as always, check out Electric Brain, Electric Shadow on Bandcamp or your favorite streaming service, and like, comment, subscribe if you can find it in your heart.